Good morning, Doug. We're here with the Friday Q&A. Got a bunch of questions from our viewers over the last several days. If you guys, to the viewers, if you have questions, be sure to just put them in the comments of any of the videos. I go through and I collect them all, and then Doug and I get through as many of them as we can on Fridays. So we love the questions. Keep them coming. So Doug, let's start with the first one here. They say, I'm wondering how people will make money in the future if most jobs are done by robots, automation, and AI.
Okay, that sounds like a serious situation. I mean, if robots are doing everything, what are we going to do? The way I answer that question is personally, I have an infinite desire for more goods and services. If I get one Ferrari, maybe I want two or three different models. If I get one big house, maybe I want a second one in another location. Maybe I'd like hot and cold running servants. So there are 7 billion other people that basically have unlimited desires for goods and services. So it's up to you to be an entrepreneur, preferably an entrepreneur, not an employee. Don't like employees. Well, they're necessary, but you don't want to be one if you can avoid it. All you have to do is figure out of these infinite things that people want, which ones can you provide at a profit?
Right. Yeah, and I think even when you have all these robots and automation, what that does is it just should theoretically drive the cost of production down substantially, so that which then causes demand, as you were saying, to kind of explode. And so there's more and more desires that that humans have as the cost of producing things becomes lower, and there's always a place to create value.
Yeah, you just have to, what you have to ingrain in your head is that there is an infinite desire for infinite goods and services. It's up to you to figure them out and provide them at some cost level. Okay. Now think about it. Next question.
Okay. Doug, I want to read your book Assassin, but I would like to actually listen to it on Audible. Is it going to be available in audiobook form soon?
I am told that it is being recorded, perhaps as we speak, and it'll be out in a matter of days.
Awesome. All right, good. So Doug, what's the best protection against deflation? According to Harry Brown, it's long-term treasury bonds, but then their real interest rates must still decrease towards negative rates. How probable is that? Any ideas?
Well, Harry's no longer with us and hasn't been for about 10 years, I guess. And it's now a different world than it was back then. Buying long-term treasury bonds is one thing when they're yielding 5 or 6%, or even 12 or 13%, which they were back in the early 80s. It's a different thing when they're yielding 1 or 2%, like we're talking about now. So I would think the answer is to fill in that slot, to buy T-bills, short-term, certain to be rolled over, unlikely to be defaulted on, give you flexibility, don't fluctuate very much in price at all. So at this particular point, I'd replace the T-bond element with T-bills.
When there's really not the interest spread between those two is not very substantial anyway, right?
Yeah, and T-bonds are a very, very bad speculative proposition today. I mean, look, if interest rates are 1.5%, I mean, what's your upside? Not very much. Your downside could be great, though, if interest rates skyrocket back to where they could, and I think should be.
Got it. Okay, that's good. Let's see. Could it be that distortions in the financial system are so great this time that the classic states are completely disintegrating and into regions? I should phrase this question a little bit better. Is the financial system, the distortion so bad that the classic nation state structure essentially could disintegrate into different regions?
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that that's happening. And I've tried to draw to people's attention numerous times. Look, the Soviet Union broke up into 15 republics, and actually Russia should break up into a bunch more. Yugoslavia broke up into 6, Czechoslovakia broke up into 2. I mean, people have forgotten that it was only in 1871 that Germany came together as one country. Before that, it was dozens, it was scores of principalities and all kinds of little subdivisions. Same thing with Italy under Garibaldi. Before that, it was all kinds of dukedoms and kingdoms and God knows what. I think it's going to devolve to that again. And even today, in Italy and in Spain and a lot of European countries, this is going on. And all the countries in Africa are completely and totally artificial and arbitrary. All those in the Middle East, Central Asia, same thing. I mean, Brazil should be at least 2 countries. Bolivia, at least 2 countries, maybe 3. So I think the world is going to reapportion, and that includes the United States.
So is the key thing that because what's been able to keep these large nation states together is that the central government still has the power essentially to be able to maintain it and keep people in line. But if there's a financial collapse or financial devastation of any kind, then they just lose the resources and maybe the will to try and hold it together. Is that how it falls apart?
Yeah, exactly. Because the last time the US had a serious secession movement, which was 1861, I mean, the federal government really didn't bring much to the party, except some nuisance taxes. But this time, I mean, all over the country, everybody's relying on the federal government, Social Security, it's Medicare, it's Medicaid. I mean, its tendrils are absolutely everywhere. So it's going to be harder and more painful for that reason for people to separate now than it would have been before the federal government became so all-encompassing.
Yeah, and I mean, you think about how dependent everyone is on deficit spending at this point and debt. That they need the money coming from the central bank, or from the federal government. All the states do, all the localities do, really, in some way, to keep the whole thing going.
Yeah, it's going to be quite an upset as all these distortions that have been cranked into the economy over many decades are liquidated. I mean, until people find new things to do, they're going to be unemployed. And a lot of things that they thought were assets are going to turn out to be liabilities even.
Yep, I agree. What's your take on mandatory vaccines?
Well, this is one of those political hot button questions, isn't it? In today's world, the big vaccine, of course, is COVID. And, they're always reporting new positive cases, new cases. But that's actually meaningless because the number of false positives, the way these tests are done, are huge. I mean, it's a question of how many times they run the test until a teeny weeny little reading comes up. Look, I thought that what happened with Elon Musk last week was very indicative. Took 4 tests, 2 positive, 2 negative.
Right. Should take it a 5th just to see.
Yeah. So as far as the slight editorial on the current COVID hysteria, if you're old, if you're fat, or if you're sick, well, you should be cautious. But if you're anybody else, forget about it. You should live life normally. Yeah. We're living in the biggest hysteria since the Salem witch trials in the late 17th century, as far as I'm concerned. As far as the vaccine is concerned, I'm not going to take it unless I absolutely have to for some reason. like I really need to get someplace and they won't let me on a plane unless I have a piece of paper. I don't want to be a guinea pig, quite frankly, for something
Right.
new. Am I an anti-vaxxer? Well, no. The problem with the problem with this whole vaccination thing, which is becoming, a worldwide. It's like a worldwide thing. Everybody's got to do, or they're viewed as typhoid Mary.
Right.
Is that when kids are just babies, little babies, they get dozens and dozens of vaccines, and they get them all at once. And I question whether that doesn't overwhelm the immune system of a little baby, which is not developed. Point number one, are all these vaccines necessary? Well, I question that. And I really question whether kids should get it that much, that early, if they are good. It's like, should you be a bubble boy wrapped in cellophane from birth and isolated from everything in the world?
Yeah.
Or should, like kids have done for, like hundreds of thousands of years, go out and play in the dirt,
Yep.
which is full of all kinds of viruses and bacteria and such. I'd be a dirt boy as opposed to a bubble boy, number
Yeah.
one. But as far as how necessary are vaccines, am I an anti-vaxxer? Look, the facts are, and I believe these are the facts, that good nutrition, good living conditions where you're not chock-a-block with other people like you're in a Bangladesh refugee camp, and a solid immune system, which is cultivated by good living habits, that's basically your all the protection you need against most things that you're vaccinated against today. So don't be a bubble boy. I mean, try to be reasonable about these things.
Well, and I certainly think of the idea of mandatory vaccines. You don't like the idea of anything being mandatory.
No, absolutely not. So I don't plan on being a guinea pig for whatever one the government approves.
Yep. Good. Okay. So Doug, we talked before about your hobby of going around to developing nations and then trying to help them privatize their systems. And we did a whole episode on that, which I'll encourage everyone to check out. I'll put it in the show notes. But someone asks if you think that your plan, essentially for turning a country into a business, could that be implemented in a sparsely populated U.S. county?
I think it would be problematical because if it's an independent country, that's one thing. They can pretty much do what they want. But if it's a political subdivision, if it's a county, the state's going to give you a hard time. And then the federal government is going to give you a hard time. So it becomes practically impossible from that point of view. And one important part of the plan that I have is in a lot of countries, the government owns a lot of stuff. Most of the land, lots of parastatal corporations, from the airline to the post office, there's lots of stuff that can be put in to capitalize the corporation before you distribute the shares. That's not the case with the county. So no, I think it's doomed to failure to try it with anything other than an independent nation.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought that's what you'd say, but I definitely wanted to ask that question. Let's see here. Someone asked about, we did our inflation deflation episode just a couple of days ago. Someone says, does a 30-year fixed mortgage at a low rate actually help beat inflation?
No, how can it? Inflation, which is the increase in the money supply, is running at really high levels right now. You're not going to outrun it with a bond where you suffer a possible default risk, you suffer the currency risk, and you also suffer the interest rate risk. So I'd say that a 30-year fixed rate bond is
Oh no, so he said mortgage. Like if
oh,
you were to
more,
take out a mortgage, you're to borrow money for a house. Is
oh,
that a way to
okay. I
handle?
didn't get that. It wasn't clear to me. I'm looking at that, whether he was talking about buying a bond or taking out a mortgage. Okay. I see it must be a mortgage. Well, yeah, I think that that's probably a really good speculation because what you can get a mortgage now for, what is it, 2.5%, 3%? I don't know.
Insane. Yeah. Yeah. It's really
Yeah,
low.
so that's going to be like a gift, a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. I
Yeah.
would definitely do it. The only problem that you have is that you better make sure that the proceeds of that mortgage don't dry up and blow away in some goofy investment. Then you're stuck with the mortgage and you don't have the proceeds from the mortgage.
Exactly.
So that's the risk. I think it's a great speculation, but you better put the proceeds someplace safe and smart.
Yep. Okay. So, someone asks, what is the most exotic and beautiful island or country that you've ever visited?
Yeah, you sent me that question to look at. And there are so many. There really are. I mean, the whole world is a beautiful place. Uh, I'm not a fan of cities from the point of view of beauty because there's trash in the streets and bums in the streets and crowded people, many of whom are impolite. So, what's the most exotic country that I've ever visited? Huh, I just can't say.
Hmm.
I mean, I just really can't say. You want to go someplace where nobody else goes, where you're the only tourist, perhaps?
How about some place that just felt like it had its own character that was so distinct from anywhere else? You know, everything now is kind of homogenized. In most places you go, you get basically the same experience. You know, chain hotels, chain restaurants, virtually everywhere.
Well, yeah, okay. How about Vanuatu?
Mm. Okay.
Now, I don't know how many people are familiar with that country. It used to be known as the New Hebrides, and it used to be a condominium between Britain and France. Now it's independent, and it's about 165 islands, each one of which has its own culture. You got an island with the big Nambas and the small Nambas. You got the island with the bungee jumpers, that jump off the platform.
With vines.
You got the island with the John Frum cargo cult. And I've actually been to several of these different islands. I've been to Vanuatu, I think, 3 times. So yeah, that's weird. And once you get out of the capital, uh, Port Vila, yes, I think that's it, which is full of Australian and New Zealand tourists that go there to drink. That's basically what they do. It's pretty wild and pretty exotic.
Hmm.
So yeah, go there. Now you're probably going to be the only one in your town that's done so.
Oh yeah, I think so. Um, so someone asks here about just validating the idea of an all-in sustaining costs when it comes to gold mining. Says that it says all-in sustaining cost is a cost model for gold mining, which might be described as a subset of true cost economics. Is that right?
Yeah, I think I see what he's talking about. It's that where you have costs that you can offload just out there someplace that are absorbed by society in general. Like, for instance, if you got a factory and you can dump the effluent in the river, well, that should be a cost, but it's not a cost. It's free. Why? Because the river is unowned. And you could say the same thing could be true of air pollution. You got a factory and you're dumping all kinds of nasties into the air. Should be a cost for that. When we talk about mining, the cash cost is just the actual cost of mining one more unit of gold or coal or whatever it is. Really straightforward. Doesn't take into account all kinds of legal costs, all kinds of public relation costs. Doesn't take into account amortization of all the equipment or replacement of the reserves that every ounce you mine is an ounce that's not there, you got to replace it. or the restoration of the site to pristine condition again. Probably, so that's the difference between all-in sustaining and cash costs. It's quite a difference, huge difference. Uh, but maybe, and probably, since mining is such a hated industry, maybe they're going to add in possible air and water pollution in the future. Or maybe they're going to figure out, well, wait a minute, there's long-term medical costs for the miners that they're breathing dust. Well, if you're underground in a coal mine, yeah, that's a real element. If you're in an open pit gold mine, it's not. But don't worry, they'll make it an element anyway. So it ain't over yet. Costs are going to go higher.
Someone asked, speaking of mining, what do you think about platinum? We've talked about silver and gold, but platinum's not come up in our conversations yet.
Yeah, that's right. Look, it's an industrial metal. In the 19th century, people were counterfeiting gold coins using platinum because it was cheap. It was less than gold. So it's an industrial metal. So it's a question of what are the technological uses for platinum in the future? It used to be the palladium was a lot cheaper than platinum. Now platinum's a lot cheaper than palladium. And, then you got iridium and rhodium and all these other goofy metals. And incidentally, every metal in its pure metallic form, they're all silver in color. They all kind of look alike, incidentally. The only ones that don't fit that paradigm are copper and gold. All the rest look like silver, more or less. So would I buy platinum right now? Absolutely no opinion. Kind of looks cheap, but it was only 30 years ago that it was, like $30 or $40 an ounce. And it's about 800 or 900 now. I don't know. I didn't even watch it closely. No opinion.
Okay. You don't have to answer this question if you don't want to, but someone asks if you've ever tried ayahuasca, mushrooms, or something else like that.
Yeah, look, I've always said I'll try anything once, twice if I like it. And there's all kinds of these things that, there's not just, mushrooms and ayahuasca. There's actually hundreds of these things out there that have been put together. There's a book by Shulgin. What's Shulgin's first name? It's about this thick, and I have a copy of it. And it talks about how to formulate and what the effects are on hundreds of things like, ecstasy and many, 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 many more. So you almost can't try them all. But if you have any really neat suggestions, let me know. They're all illegal, though. I'll draw that to your attention. So there's a certain amount of risk.
There's a certain amount of risk. Although, a lot of these things are becoming decriminalized, at least, which doesn't make them legal, but decriminalized is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, it is indeed.
Okay, so let's see. What do you think
about purchasing property in foreign countries, such as Argentina or Uruguay? How can I get started?
Yep. Let's do that one.
Yeah, well, purchasing property anywhere. Property, it's like what we were talking about earlier. Property can definitely be an asset, but it can also be a huge liability disguised as an asset. There's lots of costs to owning property. And the problem that I've found, having owned quite a bit of property in various foreign countries at this point, I really have, is that if you're not there, you'll find that, taxes or government assessments can, really could damage your title. You might not even know about it if you don't come and visit your property very often. And in a lot of countries, squatters are a gigantic problem. They're a huge problem, especially if you own a big piece of land. But even if you own a small piece of land, even if you own an apartment that they can break into, once they're there, you almost can't get rid of them. I mean, it's horrible. So it's not all a bed of roses. It really isn't. So yeah, you can speculate in property, and I've had very good luck and I've had bad luck on both. But considering the cost and the benefit and the nuisance of owning it, and there are advantages to owning it too. I mean, you know, right now in Argentina, you can go down and buy 100,000 acres, basically mountain land or desert land. 100,000 acres. What do you pay for that? Eh, maybe $1 million,
Hmm.
maybe a lot less. Depends on a lot of things. So, that's good cocktail party conversation, if nothing else.
Right.
I mean, listen, that movie with Out of Africa, I think it was called, with it's that famous actor, Meryl Streep. And
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right.
it starts off with the first line in this book by, I think her name was Denise Isaacson, is, "Once I had a farm in Africa." Now, that's a romantic, okay? So maybe you owe yourself that just for the hell of it. You might lose all your money, but hey, listen, all you got in the end is memories and tall tales to tell. So yeah, you can go and buy a farm in Africa. If I was going to buy a farm in Africa, I would probably buy a farm in Namibia. They're generally divided into 7,500 hectare. That's like a standard size plot in Namibia. I don't know why, but it is. And they're pretty damn cheap at this point. So yeah, you can do that. Have an adventure for a year. Consider it a write-off, or not. Maybe you'll get lucky. But look,
Well, what if somebody
don't
even
jump
gets,
into it. If you got to ask the question, you shouldn't do it. Wherever you're thinking of doing it, you better go and live there for X number of months before
yep,
you do it.
yep, totally agree with that. Um, let's see. Someone asked about with globalization the way it is today. Do you think a one world passport is possible?
Oh, well, I'm sure that it's in the plans of the powers that be to have a one world medical passport.
Yep.
That yellow vaccination card that, well, I've had one for decades, smallpox, and I forget what else is in there, malaria, I don't know, a bunch of things. So they're probably going to formalize that, and everybody's got to have one. There's going to
Yep.
be a lot less travel in the future. And that's one of the reasons why.
Yeah,
Not
I think so too. I think the health excuse, global data sharing on on passengers and travelers going wherever you're going. It's it can be connected to your passport, but it won't be your passport itself. But yeah, I definitely see that in the future.
Yeah, before it ends, I think they're going to encourage, before they require, everybody to get a subcutaneous chip that can be read for your convenience.
People will be signing up for it. I bet you.
Oh, yeah, they will. They'll love it.
So let's see. Everyone focuses on collapse of civilizations, but they wonder what is responsible for the Reformation, the Enlightenment, the Age of Reason. I know the quick, easy answer is the return to philosophy, the philosophy of Aristotle. But how did it happen? How did his philosophy spread? And how can it be repeated? So we see ourselves on the track to doom, essentially. And but how do those positive things end up coming out of cultures?
Yeah. Well, that is a really good question. That is almost a cosmic question. I mean, you got to ask yourself, is mysticism going to triumph over reason? Is force in the state going to triumph over voluntarism? If so, for how long? Uh, Thomas Jefferson thought about this type of thing, and he came to the conclusion that if you're going to have a, a, a free and pleasant society, everybody should basically be like a yeoman farmer, have his own piece of land, his own nice house, his own library, leisure to think. Helps if you have slaves that'll, do all the grunt work for you. But then robots might replace
Yeah.
slaves. So there's some cause for optimism in the future when robots take over. I mean, maybe we can all live like Jeffersonian gentlemen farmers. And and think about these things and clear our minds of mental aberrations that make us act irrationally and stupidly? I don't know the answer to that question. I suspect that in the hundreds of thousands of years that humans evolved from a common relative with the chimpanzee, uh, we've had all kinds of things genetically programmed into us that are just hard to get rid of hard to get rid of. I mean, when you're living in, forget about Aristotle and the wonderful methods of thought that he brought to humanity. It's that for hundreds of thousands of years before that, we were grubbing for roots and berries and killing each other with clubs and being torn limb from limb by animals and hunted and hunting. And this, that's kind of given us a genetic template that's hard to break. So it makes me kind of pessimistic. It's like the level of philosophy and thinking that we have has not advanced really at all for a long, long time. But the technology that we have has advanced, hyperbolically. So what happens when you give a bunch of crazy chimpanzees, not just nuclear weapons, but stuff a lot dangerous, more dangerous than nuclear weapons? It probably won't end well. On the other hand, if Kurzweil is right about the singularity, so the next 20 years are going to be just fascinating.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you could argue that the Age of Enlightenment, the Reformation, technology had a role to play in all of these things, and how ideas spread throughout, throughout society. So it seems to me technology is probably the gateway for those things to happen. An enabling technology that makes something possible that wasn't possible before. Printing books, for instance.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, started with the conquest of fire, and then, a few 100,000 years later, the wheel. So, yeah.
Slow progress at first.
Right.
All right. That's a great question, though. I love it. See, get back to the inflation deflation video we did recently. It says that most of the population could not write an emergency check for $500 today. Why is deflation bad for them?
Well, yeah, they don't have $500. Well, inflation's obviously been bad for them because it's probably is what the main thing that's precluded them from savings, at least after taxes. They don't have the money left to save. But if they had a deflation, why would it be bad for the little guy? Well, he's head over heels in debt, probably credit card debt, auto debt, school debt, mortgage debt. I don't know, lots of kinds of debt. So would deflation be bad for them? From that point of view, it would be. But you know what? Everybody goes bust. It's almost the same as nobody going bust. Look, I think we're headed towards real financial chaos. I mean, much higher levels of inflation than perhaps when the Fed drops the ball. It could be a catastrophic deflation, panic. The whole society rests on nothing but confidence at this point. Forget about the economic fundamentals. I mean, the FDIC saying your deposit is guaranteed up to $250,000. That's called the sticker principle. I mean, you have confidence because there's a sticker that says, "Oh, have confidence, nothing to worry about."
Right.
So, gee, I don't know the answer to that question. Look, if you can't write a $500 check that won't bounce, you better do something to straighten up your life and fly right. And if you don't, frankly, I don't have too much sympathy for you. What it means is you got to cut your consumption to the bone and get a second job until you can at least get $500 cash in your hand. So I'd say this is an irrelevant question for anybody reading this right now.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay. About the Fed, someone asks, what are the consequences of the Fed balance sheet expanding to 7 trillion? Does this place the Fed in a more vulnerable or advantageous position going forward, being that it is a private company?
Well, is it a private company? And does that make any difference, really? Yes, I know when it was formed, the US government owns half of it and some big banks own the other half. I don't know. I think that's a distinction without a difference. Um, but the fact is, the Fed is becoming more and more important. And as the government has to rely on printing money more than taxing, it'll become more important yet. I'll tell you what it impresses me about the way these things work. By far, the biggest and most important building in Harare, Zimbabwe, is the central bank building. I mean, it towers over any other building in the city, showing how important the central bank is to that country. Did that in any way preclude them from totally destroying the fact that they got all these gold-plated things? A fantastic building, actually. Did that keep them from printing $100 trillion bill and then destroying the currency? And incidentally, the currency there is being destroyed again. No. So, yeah,
It's not an advantage. You can't imagine it's an advantage for the Fed's balance sheet to be ballooning like this.
Well, God, if they've got $7 trillion worth of assets on their balance sheet,
Right.
maybe they should buy a bigger building to house all their PhD economists.
I love it. They had a part two of that question. You talked about different countries earlier this week. We talked about where you might go to escape the coming storm, I think is the way I titled it. We didn't mention Paraguay. And so someone asked if Paraguay is a worthwhile destination for a second passport.
The answer to that question is yes, it is. If you go to Paraguay and hook up with a lawyer, pick the right lawyer, of course, he or she will probably be somebody of German descent, because Paraguay is full of Germans. A lot of them are Amish or Mennonites, scores of thousands of them, actually. But anyway, the Germans are very important in the Paraguayan economy. Spend one day, and they'll bring the police and everybody else to be fingerprint you and so forth to their office, and you will get a permanent residency document. And after 3 years of owning that, you can go back, take a very simple test, and become a Paraguayan citizen with passport and all the other privileges. So to answer the question, it's cheap, it's easy, it's quick, 3 years. And if you're in a position to do it, yes, you should do it. I don't know why the Paraguayans, based on that, aren't selling economic citizenships like so many other countries, 10 or a dozen, for anywhere from $100,000 to $2 million today. They're missing a trick.
They really are. They really are. We talked about the stock market recently, and one of the things was just there's all this. What you said, Robinhood didn't. It's commission-free trades, but they're earning money from you somehow. And so the question this person has is, in a world where human interaction is being replaced by ever faster technology and a battle between bots, how can you trust that the price you see on the screen is a fair price?
Fair.
Meaning, well, fair, yeah. Well, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I'm sure that the questioner means fair as like I'm not being overtly ripped off and cheated, as opposed to looking for a philosophical discussion of what's fair. I mean, if the market crashes and the price is really low, is that fair? Or if it's a bubble and goes really high, is that fair? I mean, fair is a tricky word, but well, look, when a bid is posted online, it's for a certain number of shares, 100 shares, 1,000 shares, it'll say, and you can hit the bid and then see if there's another bid below that. So that's how we have price discovery. It's more of a problem if you're trading on the pink sheets, the US pink sheets over the counter. There, you just have to see what various brokers are willing to buy or sell shares for, and that's much trickier. So actually, you never really know what's fair.
Yeah, fair's a hard word.
Fair is a hard word.
Will someone asked about the Fed? Will there ever be a bottom again with the Fed and government intervention? Can they allow this Ponzi to deflate? I assume they're talking about the stock market, the bond market, everything.
Yeah. Well, I don't know why everybody would do this, but everybody doesn't have to do it because prices are set at the margin. But with the value of these financial markets in the hundreds of trillions now, if a lot of people, enough people decide to sell, prices will drop. And then margin calls will be made because there's a lot of margin in the world today. Others will be forced to sell. And maybe at some point, the Fed will step in and buy. I mean, the Central Bank of Japan has been doing that for years. Central Bank of Switzerland has been buying stuff for years. So, yeah, I mean, anything can happen today as long as people accept dollars.
Right. Question about passive investing strategies. People who dollar cost average into low cost index funds over the long term. Well, this is what should an investor do now? Should they diversify their portfolio with a lower weighting in equities? It's asking about two things.
Well, you're asking the wrong person because I own some common stocks in speculations, industrial speculations of one type or another. Not huge positions. Look, I'm overweight, really and truly overweight in gold and gold mining stocks. So that's how I'm playing it. But what should you do? Well, Harry Brown, who came up earlier, and he was a very good friend of mine, and Harry was very wise and very smart. He put together something called a permanent portfolio fund to answer exactly this question. So if you have some assets and none of us can predict the future, but you want your assets to be there. So what do you do? So I can't remember what Harry put in the permanent portfolio fund. You can Google that term and find out. But I think it was like 50% common stocks in a low-cost fund, like Vanguard, of one of their general funds, and like 25% in government bonds, and 10% in T-bills, and 10 or 15% in gold, and I can't remember what else. But it was a very well worked out portfolio. And what you do is every year you rebalance it. So if the bonds have gone up a lot, you sell down to the 30% level. And if the stocks have gone down a lot, well, you sell the rest of the things to bring it up to the 50% or whatever the level was. And over time, you back test these things. It's a prudent approach to just keep capital together. So look at that. But there's no easy answers. Look, if you were a rich German at the end of World War II, and it turned out you were in the Soviet part of Germany, you lost everything. So there's nothing you could have done to keep capital together. So it can be a problem.
Someone's asked about price volatility in gold. It's like whenever there's vaccine news and rumors, gold goes down a lot. It gets hit. It's been down recently, last couple months. I almost maybe a month, maybe 5 weeks, something like that. Gold stocks have been punished. recently. What do you think about? I mean, I guess the question is the news cycle and rumors and all of that. How much do you think that those actually matter when it comes to these gold and gold stocks, or and how much of it instead is about this macro trend? I guess.
As far as I'm concerned, it's all about the macro trend. Listening to the news and watching stuff from day to day is a waste of time. That, and it can only interbulate your mind. So, uh, actually, uh, I look at my portfolio every day, just out of interest. Has it gone up or down? And whether it's gone up or down has very little influence as to whether I'm going to sell it or not, or buy more, or do anything. Uh, and frankly, since gold last peaked at, what did it peak at? Like 2050 or something like that. I
Yeah.
don't even remember. These are academic numbers. My portfolio has gone down maybe 5% from the peak. It's a random fluctuation.
Hmm.
So I don't want to clutter my mind up with second guessing the market, because you can't do it. Yes, I know people that read charts and people that have black boxes and people that have, quant computer programs say, yeah, they know exactly what's going to happen. It's all nonsense and baloney.
It does all seem like nonsense. I think that one of the keys is just not being overly leveraged in anything, so that if something does get that there's a 20% retracement in the value of a stock or something like that, you don't panic because you're not going to lose sleep over it.
Yeah, exactly. And the problem with borrowing money to invest, God forbid, borrowing money to speculate, is that something goes wrong and your margin clerk will squeeze you out, probably right at the very bottom.
Yep, I've experienced this.
Yep, we all
And
have. We
yep,
all have.
yep. That's one thing you told me. I said I was telling you about relaying my story about buying gold futures contracts during the GFC. And you said, I was explaining how I was meeting all these margin calls. He goes, Matt, rule number one is you don't meet the margin call. You just let it go.
Yeah, that's right. It's the market's way of telling you that maybe you're wrong. Look,
Yeah.
let me tell you a story. I don't know if anybody listening is going to remember who Jerome Smith was, but Jerome was a contemporary of Harry Brown's, and I became very good friends with Jerome. We palled around a lot. And in at one point, Jerome was, and he wrote several books on this that were popular at the time, too, back in the late 70s. And anyway, we're in Zurich, and we wander into this den of ill repute, let's just say. And, all these, at the time, Austrian girls were populating these places. And, we were just deluged with all these great looking girls. And Jerome, at that time in 1980, said, he allowed to me, that he was worth $50 million. And 50 million is a lot of money today, but it was really a lot of money 40 years ago. It's like 250 million today. Now we're talking real money. And so he was spending thousands of dollars, thousands and thousands of dollars, buying them roses and champagne and all this type of thing. And because it was basically, he was using margin. He was using the futures market, actually, which is how he computed he was worth that. And it wasn't long thereafter. It was like a couple of years later, Jerome had lost everything. And he was down on his luck and living in Nicaragua.
Hmm.
So the mighty can fall sometimes.
My experience with futures contracts was that it wasn't for me. That's what I learned from it. Too much leverage.
No, it's a really tough game to play for many, many, many different reasons. And I can't help myself sometimes, but just small positions because I'm interested in playing the game, but nothing serious ever.
Smart. Okay, so a couple other countries people ask about that we didn't mention when we did our quick round the world tour the other day. What about Russia as as a potential place to get out of the storm?
Russia. Well, look, you know who's going to Russia right now in pretty good numbers are South African Boers. In other words, the original white inhabitants of South Africa, the ones that not a British background, because the ones with
Dutch, weren't
British
they?
background, huh?
Dutch? Were they
Yeah,
Dutch? Yeah.
exactly, those people. And their families have been in South Africa generally for 100, 200, 300 years. So unlike the British South Africans, they don't have any other passports. And South Africa is going to get hotter and hotter and hotter. If you're a white person, a lot of them are going to Russia today. But would I put Russia on my list? I was actually thinking about moving to Moscow for 6 months, just because it would be really entertaining and I could meet a lot of interesting people in a short period of time, et cetera, et cetera. But you'd have to learn the Cyrillic alphabet, which is the first stumbling block to learning Russian, which is hard, at least if you're, speaking one of the Western European languages. It's pretty different. Yeah, I guess it's okay, but I'd rather choose Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, or Poland.
Yeah.
I would, as long as you're looking to that part of the world.
Okay. Well, then in that same vein, what about Nicaragua?
Nicaragua, run by, what is that guy's name? He first became known when he was an ex-guerrilla leader and he bought himself a $100 pair of sunglasses back when $100 was a lot of money to pay for a pair of sunglasses. Kind of showed his colors at that point. He's basically a communist, a thief. If you want to move to Nicaragua, I would choose one of these developments on the coast, like one that I got involved with Bill Bonner and Agora years ago. And it worked out okay. As a speculation, it worked out really well, I've got to say. And it's nice. It's a gated community. And do something like that. But really, it's a genuine third world country, okay?
Yeah, it is.
And there's not a lot of charm there. It's got some pretty places like that big lake in the middle and all that, but I think you can do better than Nicaragua. Look, if you want Central America, like I said the other day, I think Panama is the place to go.
Yeah. If I recall, the name of the place in Nicaragua was Rancho Santana.
That's right, Rancho Santana. It's actually quite nice.
Yep.
So
I've been there several times. I like it.
It is. And I think prices are probably pretty low right now, if you check.
I bet they are. Yeah. Yeah, because they had this problem with the students were running this little kind of protest rebellion thing against the government about 2 years ago, and so there was all kinds of problems where real estate prices were getting suppressed because of all of that.
Yeah.
And then now you have the COVID stuff on top of it, the locking borders. It's got to be rough there.
Yeah. I don't know really. What does Nicaragua produce? Bananas and coffee?
Yeah.
Not sure if there's anything else, quite frankly.
Mark Ford says cigars that are pretty good, but I don't know about that.
I know. I know. And they are nice, those Nicaraguan cigars. But look, you really can't beat a Cuban cigar. Anyway, it's a matter of taste, okay? Some people like French wines, some people like California wines. Okay, I understand. But you know what? It's 1 o'clock here where
you got to go. That's right.
I've got to go to an interesting meeting of all kinds of people who probably won't like me very much when I get there.
Well, so be entertaining anyway. Well, thank you, Doug. I appreciate it.
Talk to you Monday.
Okay, bye-bye.